This is our terrific team here at the Philadelphia Foundation. Not pictured is Nigel Jones, our new communications associate who did such a great job of helping to refine this presentation. So starting from the top, Sharessa Gordon, our manager of grant making operations, Angie Pabone, program officer for the Fund for Children, Kim Gilmore, our scholarships program officer, Kadris McIntosh, our grants associate, Casey Thompson, program officer for the DA's fund as well as direct services, Ted Qualley, our communications director, and Maggie Kirk, who is not able to join us today, but certainly will be available to answer your questions using her information here. So the Philadelphia Foundation, as many of you already know, is one of the nation's first community foundations. We have awarded more than $700 million in grants and scholarships, and look forward to reviewing your applications and getting funding out into the community this fall. We're going to talk a little bit about two different processes today. One is the competitive grant making process. We sometimes also call this our discretionary grants. And as many of you may know, we created a new application process in the spring. And so this is our second time using this process. We're hoping this will make it simpler for you to apply for our grants, because we'll just be asking you to complete the common application to create an organizational profile once, and then you can use that to apply to multiple types of grants at the foundation each year. The special initiatives process, we will talk a little bit more about as we go through the presentation. And Ted, I'm going to turn it over to you here to talk a little bit about the types of funds that we have at the foundation.
So I'm playing the role of Maggie Kirk today, who, as Leanne indicated, could not be on. Just wanted to take you through this chart, which is meant to both illustrate the types of funds that we have, and these are the funds by which we make grants, but also to give you a sense of the volume of grants in proportion to the types of funds. So that light blue there you can see represents donor advised funds. And so we have hundreds of donors who have donor advised funds with us, who then we work with to put grants out into the community. And as you can see, that's the lion's share of the grants and grant dollars that go out into the community. Much of what we will talk about today will come from other areas. But you can see there are designated grants. Those are designated for specific organizations. Scholarships, Kim being our scholarship officer, we do have some agency endowments. So some nonprofits have endowments with us and we manage those funds. There are field of interest funds. These could be specific to healthcare or to children and youth. And so these are funds with a specific focus. And then a small group of undesignated funds. And so the competitive grant making pulls from several of these areas. But the idea here is to give you a sense and also to underscore the opportunity that donor advised funds present, which the best way that we have to help nonprofit organizations potentially access funds from those donor advised funds is our donor advised fund form. It is, we laugh and we call it a one-pager, but we ask nonprofit organizations to download this form to answer a few questions on there, really, which help us understand what the organization is and does, much like your basic organizational profile. But it's almost, you could think of it as sort of a wish list. A lot of the donor advised fund holders are interested in tangible things. And so recent examples that come to mind were a donor advised fund holder that wanted to provide bathing suits for a youth swimming program. And so when they learned that they could, for a certain amount of money, help outfit an entire class of swimmers, that was something that spoke to them. And so many nonprofits have very discreet asks or specific projects that, if not for the funding, they would be able to do. And so this donor advised fund form is the way that our donor relations team, donor services team, works with donors to identify nonprofits and needs within those nonprofits so that they could help make those grants. And so I would encourage everyone on the call to take time, and this is a link that you'll be able to download. And if you haven't completed this form, or it's been some time, consider completing this form. It's pretty straightforward, and you can go over one page, and then to return it. The instructions are on the form, but Maggie Kirk and the rest of the donor services team looks at this, and then as they have conversations with our fund holders, that's sort of where they do the matching, and they might present a few options for a fund holder to consider. So I would strongly encourage everyone to do that, in addition to exploring what we might have available from a competitive standpoint.
Thank you, Ted. So our primary focus in the webinar today is going to be our competitive grant making process. So we'll take you through each of the types of categories of competitive grants. But to emphasize, this is a two-step process. So we collect basic information from your organization and review that information. You'll see at the end of this first application, the common application, that there's a place where you can say what grants you want to apply for. So you can select there one type of competitive grant, but any of the special initiative grants for which your organization is eligible. And this gives us just a moment to be able to say back to you whether you are or are not eligible for those applications, because we don't want you to waste any time on something that your organization might not be eligible for. And in some instances, you'll see us directing you to a different category. That may be because we think you're a better fit in that category. It may also be because looking at the applications we have in this particular cycle, we're trying to move you to the place where you're going to have the greatest likelihood of funding. So really our emphasis in that process, in addition to reviewing that your basic financial documents and organizational information, is to try to get you to the place where you're most likely to be eligible for support. After you complete that first part of the application, which closes on August the 19th, we will review that and turn it around. You should hear from us no later than August the 30th. You will hear from us via our Smarter Select system. And so the email will come back to whomever fills out the application on behalf of your organization, and it will come as an automated email. So you may need to watch your spam and junk filters. If for some reason you have not heard from us by August the 30th, please reach out to us right away at Grant Making Services in the email that we'll share at the end of this PowerPoint, so we can send you the information and the link to anything for which you've been approved. Everybody will hear back from us one way or another. And so we just want you to watch for that email prior to August the 30th and let us know if for some reason you don't receive it. All right, so we're going to move on to talking a little bit about the categories. I'm going to just go quickly over these, and then we're going to go into great depth in a few minutes. So our categories for our competitive grant making are direct service, our general operating support grants, impact, which are typically program grants, leadership, which is focused on leadership transition and other opportunities at the nonprofit organizations, our advocacy unrestricted grants, and our fund for children. We want to give you a little bit of an overview about the competitive grants and the special initiatives. I'm going to ask Sharessa, can you take us through these, please?
Sure. So just a brief overview. There are a number of special initiative grants that we offer along with our competitive grants. There are a few that are external organizations that we are supporting them doing their back office administrative grant making work, while others are within our smaller programs within the foundation. So the Black Community Leaders Fund that supports organizations that are Black-led. And by Black-led, we mean that the CEO or the board chair identifies as Black, and the organization is serving predominantly Black communities. And I'll go in detail a little more afterwards. Then there's a Henrietta Tower Worts Memorial, which is a separate organization from Philadelphia Foundation, but we're managing their grant-making operations. They are a charitable foundation formed to carry out the wishes of Henrietta Tower Worts, who passed away in 1933, and they support organizations who are serving youth or elderly in the city of Philadelphia. Then there's a Foreman Family Fund, which supports nonprofits who are serving young people age between 11 and 18. And those programs should be out-of-school programs that address one of these areas: photography, architectural drawing, and architecture or written arts. Then there is Brooke J. Lenfest Foundation, which was established by Brooke J. Lenfest in 2000 to support programs operating in the greater Philadelphia region with emphasis on youth development and the Philadelphia area. And I am not seeing the screen.
Yeah, so lastly, the District Attorney's Office Forfeiture Fund grants, which we'll talk more about in a minute, are not a part of the competitive application. And so be aware you'll need to apply for those separately. And Casey will talk a little bit more about that in a minute.
This was my slide as well, right?
Right.
Yes.
Who is eligible to apply for the competitive grants? So the organization must be a 501c3, or they can have a fiscal sponsor. They must be serving the greater Philadelphia area, and that's Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, and Philadelphia. And we also have limited fundings for Burlington and Camden counties in New Jersey. And organizations in New Jersey, Burlington and Camden may apply for only impact grants. If the organization is fiscally sponsored, the organization must still have its own advisory board, separate from that of the fiscal sponsor. So when you submit your application supporting documents, we do not necessarily want the board for the fiscal sponsor. We want to see your advisory board. But for the 501c3, that would be for the fiscal sponsor, the budget, and the board must be for the applying organization. The organization must employ at least one full-time equivalent staff person. So it can be part-time, but there must be some full-time equivalent staff. The organization must support BIPOC and other historical marginalized and underinvested communities, and serving at least 70% of the participants served should qualify as low income. If you're a statewide or a national organization, you must show that at least 75% of your budget is raised locally, and again, have an advisory board within the area. So we are looking to see that the organization has a governing body and an advisory board that is within one of the 5 county areas that we serve. Organizations should not have deficit that's greater than 10% in the past year. And you may only submit one application for the competitive grants. So when you apply, we do ask that you tick to say which, tick an option to say which grant you're interested in, but we will review your application, the information in the common application, and do an internal review to see which one of those buckets you most align well with. And then we'll invite you to submit an application for that grant.
Thank you, Sharessa.
So there are additional considerations for the Fund for Children. Most importantly, though, is that as much of our grant making in the other 4 buckets, advocacy, direct service, leadership, and impact, are regional for Greater Philadelphia and the 2 counties in New Jersey. The Fund for Children is focused on Philadelphia County and Philadelphia City only. It's programs for children and youth, and it's limited from from birth to 18 years of age. And as well as other funders in the city, we are looking to serve the lowest income, most under-resourced communities in the city. You guys might have seen the recent Philadelphia City Fund opening a grant cycle, and they have very specific zip codes that they're targeting for out-of-school time programs. We don't do specific zip codes, but we are, like I said, looking to provide support to the most under-resourced communities across the city of Philadelphia.
Thank you, Angie. Sharessa, can you talk a little bit about organizations which are not eligible?
So ineligible organizations, if an organization is not located within the 5-county region that we mentioned before, you will not be eligible. And if you're located in Burlington and Camden and you're applying for a grant outside of impact, then you will not be eligible for that as well. Cemeteries, umbrella funding organizations. So fiscal sponsor organizations are eligible. Schools, K-12, ineligible. Colleges and universities, academic or administrative departments are also ineligible. General child care agencies, government agencies, libraries, and programs that are housed in universities that are raising less than 75% of their own funding are ineligible. But if they're raising more than the 75%, then they would meet the criteria. And local chapters raising less than 75% of their own funding are also ineligible.
Thank you, Sharessa. Angie, do you want to talk a little bit about the common elements across all of our grant making?
Sure. The way that we as program officers and grant making staff assess the applications that come in, we have rubrics, and we're looking at outcomes, your outcomes data, your SMART goals, all that, stuff that that a successful program is running. But we are also looking at some specific elements, including diversity, equity, and inclusion. And here we want it to be more than just an acronym. We want it to be a process that your organization is involved in, whether you're just starting to do some kind of assessment of where you are in terms of your hiring practices, or how you might have career ladder programs within your organization to take some of the people that are your current participants and move them to roles where they're your employees. Whatever it is, we're looking for you to be really along a continuum where you're looking at the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues across your organization, from board to staff to obviously participants. In this, we're looking for you to be creating self and welcoming places, representing different groups, addressing barriers, looking at stuff through an intersectional lens, and eventually also sharing decision making. When it comes to sharing decision making, that is also an issue in the Fund for Children that includes sharing the voice of youth in decision making. We want to be responsive to the community. The Philadelphia Foundation is a community foundation, so we try to pivot to address issues as they come up. We know all foundations have their areas that they fund, but sometimes, like for example, last November in 2022, 2022, yes, we launched a group to Coalition to Save Lives, to really address the level of gun violence, death in Philadelphia. And we've tried to match some of our grant making to support groups that are trying to support better outcomes for people and less gun violence. And obviously transformative lens, we're looking to have you go beyond just, SMART goals and outcomes. We're looking at that long-term structural change that's going to include transitioning some of your participants into your staff and having a lot of, a lot more Philadelphia folks and in the greater region living their best lives with, livable wage jobs and good education for their children. So, thank you.
Thank you, Angie. So we're going to talk a little bit about the categories of competitive grants. The first of those is advocacy. The advocacy grants are for organizations that are largely focused on advocacy or community organizing, looking at policy, regulatory, or legislative changes on behalf of marginalized or low-income communities in Philadelphia. Successful applicants will have a track record of being able to make the changes for which they're advocating. And we appreciate knowing specifically in your application what you're going to do to promote the change. Organizations across our region are eligible, but we do expect to see that you support BIPOC individuals and or other historically marginalized communities, and that you are able to demonstrate that you're operationalizing equity, as Angie was describing, with your DEI approach. Let's see. Next up, Casey, can you talk a little bit about our direct service general operating support?
Yeah, so we've continued to shift the name on this to add the emphasis on that these are our general operating funds, which everyone would love to have, and we continue to kind of increase that availability, while at the same time, this is really at this time still kind of a pinnacle grant fund in terms of folks who have some track record of funding with the foundation will be the majority of the funding. And particularly if some folks have been getting programmatic dollars for a while, if you're in alignment with some of these criterias, we'll encourage, or we may even slide some folks over into that area. But really this grant is looking at how you manage and have strategy around your work, and particularly at the DEI lens. And so although it does ask about your programs, it's more in the sense of your transformative kind of strategic theory of change, and then how do you manage and adapt to make greatest impact through that work. And so the questions really are looking to highlight the work that you're doing at the organizational level with your leadership and your board, and also that the faces around the table are reflective of the community served. So that's a particularly high bar for this fund as well. That the DEI work has moved beyond kind of, okay, we have a statement, that's a great start, training's great start. We're really hoping to see folks moving into multi-level action, but also helps be a better place to work and a more impactful and responsive organization. To that end, strategic plans, particularly as we continue to adapt out of kind of evolving world conditions, but certainly after the pandemic, we do want to see that folks have done some sort of external planning over the past couple of years. If you're worried about that, feel free to email me. Again, the key thing is really you've gotten some external stakeholder input and started to look at kind of how do you match adjustments to strategy and operations, and then overall looking at organizational best practices for your staff. The responsiveness and feedback is really key, and that data and evaluation are really used to continue to refine services. And this one is not eligible to New Jersey applicants. Is that correct? I'm looking at Leanne and Shressa. Yes. So this is PA applicants only. And if you do end up in the wrong bucket accidentally, we will let you know that you'll probably be shifted to another. But New Jersey applicants, because of where this funding comes from, it is not open to Jersey agencies.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. Good reminder. And moving on now to Impact, our program grants. Shressa, can you take us through these?
Sure. So we received most of our applications in this bucket. This is for program support. So any program that the organization needs funding for, they may submit an application for this. To be selected as an awardee, we're hoping that the organization is serving, not hoping, the organization should be serving high poverty populations in Greater Philadelphia, and this includes Burlington and Camden in New Jersey. So we would probably update this slide to reflect that. The applicant must demonstrate results-oriented programming, including a track record of success and proven outcomes for low-income communities. Again, this is our most competitive bucket, so writing strong applications is really important here. Make sure you explain exactly what the funding is to be used for, the impact you're having on the population that you are serving. And quantitative data is always welcome, but we do understand that sometimes they're qualitative, but be able to demonstrate that the organization is having an impact on the people that you're serving. Successful applicants use trauma-informed lenses, strengthen racial equity-based practices and policies in their program and program development and delivery. If the organization is applying for a program that they have not done before, a pilot program, you must show that you have had success in delivering outcomes-based programs in the past 2 years in other programs. So while you may not have the quantitative data for this program that you're applying for, you should be able to demonstrate that you have had successful outcomes with previous programs.
Thank you, Sharessa. I'll talk briefly about our leadership grants. So our leadership grants are often to support organizations in times of transition. Typically, that's a leadership transition, but it may also be to facilitate the support of a new leader who's in place. And it could also be to address an opportunity or a challenge that's come up for an organization. These grants are to support the capacities of nonprofit leaders in the areas of governance, civic engagement, board and staff development. They do not, however, support strategic planning, so we shouldn't say planning here. I'll change that. And just want you all to know that we certainly recognize the importance of strategic planning, but we're not able to support it through our leadership grants. And lastly, I would say this is typically a single year of funding for a specific effort. So if you've received a leadership grant recently, in the last 2 to 3 years, I would say it's unlikely that you'll receive a second one. If you think that there's an extraordinary reason that you would need that support, I would encourage you to email me and we can talk a little bit about it to see if it's worth it for you to apply for the leadership. If not, I may send you to Impact or another area. And if you're coming into us for training or organizational resources under leadership, be aware that we do offer Catch a Fire through our Key Skills Hub. And one of the things that I'll be looking for and asking you about will be whether or not you've made use of the Catch a Fire resources, especially if you're asking for something that is available through Catch a Fire.
Again, the Fund for Children, because of the way that it was set up, with a deal with the Eagles and the Philly Stadium back in 2004, it's limited to Philadelphia only, City of Philadelphia, Philadelphia County, programs for youth. We are looking, we have been around, like I said, since 2000, been grant making since 2004, so we're about 20 years into about a 30-year deal. The deal includes granting out $1 million of the annual investment and putting that $1 million into an endowment that will continue to fund programs for children and youth in Philadelphia after the deal sunsets. The Fund for Children covers a broad array of youth serving organizations, children and youth serving organizations, everything from out of school time opportunities, sports, arts enrichment, all kinds of different kind of supports to help improve the lives of children and youth in Philadelphia. Again, we're looking to focus the dollars on the most under-resourced communities. And I have added to my slide here that we get a question a lot. If you're a national organization that's opening a chapter here in Philadelphia, you know, I don't know, big brothers, big sisters or something, you must have a local advisory structure and an office in Philadelphia for us to consider funding you. It's really important to us that these dollars have a lot of impact in Philly and also have a lot of input from Philadelphians in the process of getting this money.
Thank you, Angie.
Mhm. Who's next? Idris.
Idris. Idris, do you want to walk us through the application process and supporting documents?
Hey, hi, yes. Well, all right, we're on the important consideration slide, so,
Sorry,
okay.
I jumped too fast.
So, application process and supporting documents. Nonprofits that meet basic eligibility requirements may complete the online application and upload supplemental documents, including your 501c3, letter, your list of board directors, most recent audit. If your organization does not have audits, we will accept your IRS 990 or profit loss statement. Current PA Bureau of Charitable Organization certificate, which means that you can operate within PA. Executive summary of current strategic plan, board approved non-discrimination policy, and organizational budget and project budget if specified. These are the supporting documents that we would require for us to move forward in the grant making process for your organization.
Thanks, Kadris. Do you
Application.
mind, hold on one sec, do you mind going back to the important considerations? Sharessa, I think this one was for you.
So for the competitive grant programs, please bear these considerations in mind. The organization must demonstrate that they're serving at least 70% of families living in poverty or under or other vulnerable conditions. We do not tell you how to get this data. Some organizations collect income data from their participants so they can use that. Others will use zip code or data provided by the city. But you should be able to demonstrate that at least 70% is low income. Priority funding will be given to organizations led by BIPOC chief executives. Organizations operating less than 3 years must provide executive summary of board-approved strategic plan, and if available, a theory of change. Generally, the foundation does not use competitive dollars to support organizations where there are familial relationships across the board and staff. So if, example, if a wife is reporting to a husband in a maybe board chair ED role, then our dollars would not be able to support that work. All organizations applying for competitive grants should have these policies in place: conflict of interest, whistleblower policies, independent process for comparable data for determining compensation. And the last one I cannot see.
Providing a copy of the 990 to board members before it's filed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharessa. And Kadris, you want to take us through the application due dates?
Yes, application due dates. The application link is now open. Common applications are due August 19th by 11:59 p.m. You will be notified no later than August 30th if you are eligible to proceed with a customized link. If you don't get a link, you can always reach out to us. All competitive and special initiative applications will be due on September 20th by 11:59 p.m. If you submitted a common application in the spring 2024 cycle and you were deferred, you will receive an email instruction on how to proceed. And if you get no emails from us by the 30th or within September, always reach out to us.
Thanks, Catrice. Sharessa, do you want to talk a little bit about the this particular cycle of Black Community Leaders grants?
Sure. So again, the Black Community Leaders Fund support organizations that are Black-led, and by Black-led, we're looking at the chief executive director or the board chair must identify as Black, and the organization should demonstrate their commitment to Black inclusion and leadership and serving predominantly Black communities. For this cycle alone, we will be supporting organizations that have budget size of 500,000 and below. So if your budget exceeds $500,000, then you would not be eligible to apply for this round only. And just so you know, the fund supports greater stability in nonprofit internal leadership, finances, and operations. There's stronger capability of nonprofits to assess their impact on communities served, and a broader ability for nonprofits, as in Black-led nonprofits, to weather challenges. So ultimately, we're looking, Black serving nonprofits will be adequately resourced to deliver services to residents, contributing to a more vibrant, equitable Greater Philadelphia. So if your organization meets the criteria, you may submit an application along with the competitive grants that we discussed earlier.
Thank you, Sharessa. And moving on to the Brooke J. Lenfest Foundation grants. So the Brooke J. Lenfest Foundation grants will be available through the common application process, but they will be restricted to organizations which have previously received Brooke J. Lenfest Foundation funding. If you're not sure whether or not your organization has received funding previously, please reach out to us at the Grant Making Services email and we can look that up for you. These grants will focus on youth development in Philadelphia and the New Jersey region. And the foundation is particularly focused on programs that can provide good quantitative outcome information. And so I would say if your program is not able to do that, this would not be the place for you to apply. You might consider coming into our impact grants because we have a little bit more ability to look at qualitative information there. But for the Brooke J. Lenfest Foundation grants, you need to have solid outcomes information. Casey, you want to talk a little bit about the District Attorney's Office Forfeiture Fund?
Yes, sorry, I was writing and okay, not off mute. Yes, as Leanne mentioned, this is one of the funds that is still completely separate from the common application. And so it will have its own link. The link is available on the Philadelphia Foundation website under special initiatives. But here are the three upcoming cycles to close out this kind of contract year of giving. And so the District Attorney and Philadelphia Foundation work in partnership on this funding. The Philadelphia Foundation conducts due diligence, and particularly over the financials. And so while this fund prioritizes grassroots organizations, it's super important that organizations are up to date on their taxes and that they have a board-approved organizational budget, which has both expenses and some sort of projections of revenue. So we do a lot of follow-up on that. So you can definitely get to the head of the pack if your attachments are all up to speed for any applicants in that bucket. And so in the past, these have been sort of general anti-violence, anti-narcotics, but in this past year or so, we're doing very specific cycles, multiple throughout the year. And so anyone who has previously applied and not been awarded, please go ahead and submit a new application since we're in a new fiscal year for many folks. Sometimes we have a little bit of carryover between cycles, but we're going to start everybody fresh. And if you have been awarded a grant already, There's a very, very tiny minuscule chance that you will get another grant. Please save yourself the time. And unless you have a vastly different application, I would not encourage folks to apply if you've already gotten one grant. A little bit of wiggle room perhaps on the elder victims of violence, since that area of work is very different than what this fund has kind of specifically focused on in the past. But the deadlines are there. This is available to organizations that do have a fiscal sponsor, but you will need the organizational budget and the advisory board for the applicant organization, and then the tax certification and all that kind of stuff will come from the fiscal sponsor. But I am available by email or any other follow-up communication to answer further questions. But generally, the portal will open in late August, and unfortunately is also due the same time as some of the other next round of competitive grant making. We keep trying to stagger those for you all and our own behalf as well, but here we are again. So happy fall, everybody. But again, I'm available to answer any questions on that one.
Thanks, Casey. And we always like to take this opportunity to remind you of our scholarships. We give more than 300 scholarships every year. Kim, would you like to talk a little bit about those?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I am Kim Gilmore. I am the program officer for scholarships, and we have completed the application process for scholarships this year, but we will open scholarships back up in February of 2025. If you know anyone that's interested in our scholarships, they can visit our website. My contact information is below if you have any other questions.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
And cycling back to what Leanne commented on her leadership application, we do Philadelphia Foundation contracts with Catch a Fire, and we have our own volunteerism portal called the Key Skills Hub. It's a place where we're trying to match volunteers to opportunities, but also it's a place where people can ask us to sponsor them on a Catch a Fire account. A Catch a Fire account is a web-based platform that already has existing volunteers that are ready and able to help you if you just want to do a phone call, or if you want to do a project in which you're doing an audit of your website, or you're starting to do some work with developing a board packet to train and introduce your new board members to your organization, or the strategic plan, like Leanne mentioned. All of those are projects that you can start on Catch a Fire, and then volunteers there will help you design whatever it is. We have moved the process to have people fill out an applications in the same platform that we use, Smarter Select. And I've added the link here where you can go in there and fill it out. We're limiting this to organizations in the greater Philadelphia and the 2 counties in New Jersey that that we fund as an organization. And if you have any questions, you can email the Key Skills Hub or me directly, and I will get back to you. But I want to emphasize this is a great resource, but it's also a very hands-on resource. You really need to make sure that when you develop a project, that you're, going back and checking on the platform and communicating with the volunteers to get a product that is going to be helpful to you and your organization. The value added is there. You just need to really put in the front end work of really designing a project and taking it to develop a product that will be helpful to your organization.
Thank you, Angie.
Mhm.
And
Before we move on to question and answers, I just want to remind everyone about Henrietta Tower Works and Nessa Foreman.
mhm.
So Henrietta Tower Works, again, this is a separate organization from Philadelphia Foundation. They have their own board, their own guidelines. And so to be qualified for this funding, the organization must be located in Philadelphia and serving Philadelphia residents. And funding, they offer general operating support as well as a specific program or project funding. And the organization's budget should be low $2.5 million. Grant sizes range from about 1 to 5,000, but the average is somewhere around 2,000-3,000. And you may apply every year for 3 consecutive years, and then the organization is asked to cycle off. And just to reiterate what Casey said earlier, if you're applying for program/project support, please ensure you submit your project budget, and budgets should have income and expense section. If one section is missing, it will be automatically declined. So make sure that your budgets have both sections. If you're unsure, you can always reach out and ask one of us. And then the NESA Foreman Fund, it supports out-of-school time programs that provide training, education, and exposure in the visual arts of photography, architectural drawing and architecture, or exposure to the written arts of writing in any format. And programs should support young people between 11 to 18 years old. The program that you're applying for should be curriculum-based and be offered for at least 1 semester, and preference is given to year-long programs. If your program is operating for just a few weeks out of a semester, I would say do not apply, because again, that would be ineligible. And the organization must have at least 2 years of proven track record. So if it's a new organization and you've not been operating for at least 2 years, you're also ineligible. And again, it must be focused, the application must be focused on one of the areas we talked about, the written arts, photography, architectural drawing, or architecture. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharessa. And as Sharessa said, we're happy to provide you with a budget template. If you're not sure what the budget should look like, just reach out to us. We'll happily share that with you. Ted, are you good to take us through the Q&A?
I am, and I'm going to group a couple of these. There's several questions about from organizations that have submitted part 1 of the application, right? So they completed an organizational profile in the spring, and want to know if they need to do that step again. In one instance, the organization was invited to apply but chose not to. In another instance, I think it's a general question.
Yes, if you completed the common application in the spring, but did not go all the way through to create an application, you are welcome to apply. You don't have to fill that all out again. But if you contact us, we'll open it up to you if you can't get into it by just logging in. And you can update any information that might be outdated. If, however, you applied in the spring and were declined, you're not eligible to reapply in the fall. You'll have to wait out 1 calendar year. So you'll have to wait until next spring to reapply.
A question about geography. So this is from an organization that is physically located outside of our greater Philadelphia service area. However, they provide services to the community, and they're asking if they would be eligible for grant funding.
You would be eligible if you meet the criteria that we described with regard to organizations from outside the region. So you have to have a local advisory board. The advisory board has to raise at least 75% of your funding, and definitely we expect, pardon me, we expect that there's Philadelphia-based staff available. So especially if we meet with you, we'll need somebody present who is working in Philadelphia. And I would say these applications are not as strong as the ones that are local, but we'd be willing to at least talk with you about it.
Another organization's asking about the eligibility as it pertains to a deficit. So in this instance, we've had a deficit in excess of 10%, have implemented an action plan to address that, and have received significant funding to close the deficit in the current fiscal year. The question is, how hard and fast is this requirement in light of ongoing and impactful corrective actions?
Yeah, Sharissa, can you answer that, please? And I'll be back in 1 minute.
So the organization has a budget that has a deficit that exceeds 10% in the current cycle that you're applying under. So we're looking at that budget with that deficit. We will not approve it. We would not approve an application for you during this time. But when you reapply with a new budget and you would have cleared up your deficit, then you'd be eligible to apply.
Ed, I see an question here that we talk about Youth-Adelphia. So let me address that here
Okay.
live. Basically, Youth-Adelphia is a very small portion of the Fund for Children grant making. And it amounts to about $50,000 worth of grant making that's done directly by a youth board. Throughout the pandemic and in the years after, that youth board has basically dissolved. So we're in the process of revamping that youth board and that youth and philanthropy process. And when we relaunch, we will have the grant making done by youth happening again through Youth-Adelphia. So while it's part of the Fund for Children, the grant making, it was being done by young people. So we're in the process of really restarting that board, because through the pandemic and having people, young people, doing the work only online, it became really unmanageable. And, you know, basically it came to its own closing time. So now we're in the process of revamping it. And when we relaunch it, we will let everybody know. Just so you know, it's a small portion. Like I said, it's about $50,000 that are granted directly to youth organizations by a youth board. So at this point, it's not a ton of grant making, but it's not happening because we're in the process of revamping that youth grant making board.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. We do anticipate giving Youth-Adelphia grants this year.
A question regarding full-time staff. So nonprofits that do not have a full-time staff are ineligible. The question, even if we have a fiscal sponsor, is the follow-up there.
Yeah, you can have one full-time equivalent. So if, for example, you have 2 half-time staff members, I would say if it's more than 2 people, reach out to us and we can give you a determination. But it's a full-time equivalent requirement, not a single full-time person. So we would be looking to see that you have staffing roughly between 35 to 40 hours a week.
We do have a scholarship-related question. Are scholarships available for education and job training? Also, are adult learners eligible? Kim, I know that many of the scholarships you manage are for folks going to college or a technical school. Do we have scholarships for education and job training?
Education, yes. And it also, I think, mentioned adult learners. Yes, but it also depends on which scholarship. So they can be viewed with the eligibility on the website. Under each scholarship, it will state if it's for high school students only, or if it's for college students as well, / also adult learners. And also, if you'd like to reach out to me directly, my number is listed on here, but it's also 215-863-8117. I believe it was Kathy that asked the question.
Thanks, Kim.
We have a question about indirect costs. Are indirect costs permissible? And if so, what is the percentage at which they are?
Indirect costs are permissible as a part of your budget, but we don't offer a funding increment for indirect costs. And so you can reflect that in your organizational budget, but we don't add a percentage onto the grant funds that you receive to account for overhead.
Two questions similar around eligibility. If an organization received funding in the spring, are they eligible to receive funding in the fall? And the second question, closely related, if we received a direct service / general ops grant in the last cycle, are we eligible to apply again this year?
Yeah, so if you applied through this competitive process in the spring and you received a grant, you are not eligible to reapply until next spring. That's if you received a competitive grant. If you received a special initiative grant, you would still be eligible to apply for a competitive grant in this fall cycle. So direct service is a competitive grant. That means you're not eligible again this fall, you're eligible next spring. But the other person, I can't tell if that was a competitive or special initiative grant. If it was a special initiative grant, then you would be eligible for competitive now in the fall.
Similar question here. And so this entity received a Black Community Leaders Fund grant in 22-23 and is asking if they are eligible to apply again.
If you received a Black Community Leaders Fund grant, you're not eligible to apply for another Black Community Leaders Fund grant, but you're certainly welcome to apply for our competitive grants. In fact, we strongly encourage that.
All right. We have an organization-specific question here. An organization's applying for a direct service grant opportunity. They're curious if they do apply, if they could apply, despite the fact that one of our side programs was awarded an advocacy grant earlier this year. So it sounds like they may be applying for a different program, but the same organization nonetheless.
Yeah,
so
whichever bucket, if you've got the advocacy, that's your grant for this year. And if Leanne wants to add to that.
And if I've misinterpreted this, I would just suggest that we follow up via email to make sure that we have the details 100% accurate.
Yeah, absolutely.
An organization has a question about being deferred. Can you clarify again, if an organization was deferred previously, do they hold tight?
If you were deferred, you'll receive a notice from us about what to do, but essentially you'll be able to use your application from the spring to complete anything that you're approved for the fall. And if that's not helpful, then please just reach out. I would say reach out to Sharessa and she'll help you through that process.
We have a question, and perhaps multiple, related to the district attorney's grants. This one in particular, if they received a grant from the district attorney's fund in 2024, are they ineligible to apply for other grants? And so this again is an instance where the district attorney's fund is a special initiative grant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe, and I just want to confirm that that does not preclude them from applying for a competitive grant, correct?
Correct. You're welcome. The limitation of only applying for one thing 1 year is for the competitive grants only. For the other special initiative grants, you generally are eligible to apply for any of those for which you're a good fit. And Casey, you can say more about the DA cycle.
Yeah, just to also emphasize that because the DA grants are specifically or prioritize smaller grassroots organization, the bar is different in terms of organizational infrastructure, right? And so in order for, if someone were funded under the district attorney's office, you probably are going to be most competitive under the impact programmatic grants. But as Sharessa had mentioned in her portion, that's also where we get our most grants, right? But definitely, I've talked to some folks about trying for Henrietta Tower Words, which would be a very good fit for our smaller folks. For the next trauma cycle, we also in the past have had a lot of general youth development applications with like maybe a little bit of, you know, we've continued to kind of raise the bar, a targeted geography, particularly Southwest West. North Central, Eastern North, and kind of River Wards, Frankfurt area. Germantown has been included in the past, but we've got a bunch of grantees from Germantown. And so we are not under trauma healing, like you should have a clinical component of some way. And so we really are trying to kind of focus more. And so I am a youth development person through and through. We want to create positive, non-stigmatized places, but this fund has limitations and really needs to be explicit activities related to the fund, not just like, okay, we, are trauma informed generally, like that's a good start. That's awesome. But we really are looking, ideally for some kind of more formal, it doesn't have to be like only therapist sessions, but for some component that is in some way kind of therapeutic.
Yeah.
And just
Thank
to
you.
underscore that response is specific to the DA's fund. I wouldn't want to
Correct.
dissuade a nonprofit in Germantown from applying for other grants, but it's
Yes, thank
specific
you,
to
Ted,
that.
for clarifying. Yeah, just for DA fund right now. Germantown folks, we'll come back to you all, but all other funds. Yes, sorry, Ted. Thanks.
The district attorney's opportunity opens on August 26th.
Mhm.
And I just want to ask one question that we have here, Casey, specific. Is that open to first-time applicants?
Yes, yes. If you are a first-time nonprofit and you haven't done your taxes yet, you are going to have a harder time. We do get some really very, very startup folks in here, and that is great. We also, like I said, really having some sort of tax track record, and ideally some track record of managing, over 30, but ideally over 50,000. So really our sweet spot is that kind of, I've managed over 50,000, under 500,000, but that's not hard and fast. But yeah, for that fund, we are looking for those a little bit smaller folks. So you can be a first-time applicant, absolutely. If you've never gotten any other grant funding, it's hard to get started. I'll talk to you more, but you can apply. Depending on the volume, they will not be as competitive.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. And Ted, I know we're coming to the end of our time. Anything else? Or should we answer the rest?
No, I think we've hit on them. I see a couple that are related to prior answers that were given, and so I think it's probably best for us to put those in writing, and that will be circulated to everyone that registered, but also on our website. We will put the PowerPoint presentation, a copy of this video Zoom session, as well as an updated FAQ, and so we can probably hit those at the end there.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who's participating. Thanks to our awesome grants and programs team at the foundation, and of course our partners in the communications department. We really appreciate you all. And to the organizations, we look forward to reading your applications and learning about the terrific work you all are doing in the community. Thank you.